Okay, picture this. It's pitch black, the sea is an absolute mess, and heavy swells are just hammering a massive jackup rig as it's being towed through a brutal storm. The hull is rolling aggressively, and you've got massive waves breaking right over the main deck. Now, that's not just some dramatic movie scene. That is the ultimate high-stakes reality for offshore crews. Welcome to this explainer, where we're going to dive deep into the absolutely critical procedures for surviving a rig move flooding emergency.
Heavy weather is the ultimate test of preparation. Today, we're unpacking the absolute nightmare scenarios that every single rig move crew prays they never face, but absolutely has to be ready for. We are talking about severe progressive flooding and the sudden, terrifying loss of towing vessels when the weather goes south. These aren't hypotheticals, They are real, documented emergencies. And tragically, massive rigs have literally been swallowed by the ocean simply because crews weren't prepared, didn't have their gear rigged ahead of time, or just couldn't act fast enough when the very first signs of trouble hit.
Progressive flooding. This is when water spreads to adjacent compartments through damaged bulkheads, ventilation ducts, or cable penetrations. It is a terrifying reality. It's not just water entering one compartment and staying put. No, it forces its way through the hull's complex web of interconnected spaces, ballast tanks, voids, pump rooms. Once the sea breaches that first line of defense, it relentlessly pushes its way deeper and deeper into the rig. To put that into perspective, progressive flooding is literally a ticking clock. At hour 1, you might take on 200 tons of water in a single void. That gives you a minor, totally manageable 3-degree list. But it accelerates fast. By hour 2, hydrostatic pressure has forced that water into 2 more compartments, and suddenly you're dealing with a 9-degree list. And by hour 3, multiple compartments are flooded. The hull is completely unstable, and you're staring down an 18-degree list. The water ingress speeds up exponentially as more compartments fail, which turns a manageable problem into a total catastrophe.
So, what does this all mean? It means hourly bilge soundings are not optional. Seriously, because as flooding compounds so quickly, early detection is everything. It is absolutely crucial. Sticking to those hourly checks is literally the only way to catch a leak early enough to actually do something about it, well before the physics of the flood make it impossible to save the rig. Emergency Scenario 1. Loss of towing vessels. Okay, imagine the main tug's engine room suddenly floods, or massive wave hits and the towing wire completely snaps under the violent shock load. In an instant, the jackup rig is disconnected. It is totally adrift, no main tug attached, right in the teeth of a violent storm. Forward-facing tow versus drifting broadside. The contrast here is huge. When you have a controlled forward-facing tow, you're actively minimizing the rig's roll and keeping heavy, green water off the deck. But the second you lose that towing control, the rig is naturally going to turn broadside to the prevailing swell. For a low freeboard hull, that is the worst possible spot to be in. Drifting broadside maximizes the roll, it maximizes those crushing waves sweeping over the deck, and it drastically spikes the risk of massive structural flooding.
When this disaster strikes, survival depends entirely on getting that towing control back. Step 1. The standby tug, which, by the way, is always mandated on these moves for exactly this reason, moves in aggressively. Step 2. The rig crew urgently deploys a pre-rigged emergency tow line directly from the stern. And Step 3. The standby tug picks up that line and physically wrenches the rig back onto a safe heading. You have to stop that broadside rolling before the whole thing capsizes.
Pre-rig emergency tow lines before departure. Guys, this is a massive reality check. Think about this practically. You cannot be out there searching for heavy equipment in a pitch-black storm while the deck is pitching wildly under your boots. Those massive tow lines must be 100% ready to go in minutes, handled by a crew wearing bulky survival suits. If that gear is tucked away in some locker or just coiled unlashed on the deck, forget it. You simply will not be able to deploy them in time.
Emergency Scenario 2. Internal flooding. So here's our second nightmare. Picture a patrol crew member climbing down into a void space during heavy weather, only to find water rapidly rising above the tank top. The weather up top is getting worse by the minute, and there's a massive, active, open sea ingress happening right beneath their feet.
Now, your first instinct is obviously to kick on the standard bilge pumps, right? But the capacity difference is wild. A standard bilge pump handles about 50 cubic meters per hour, but the rig's cement slurry pump capacity, that sits at well over 500 cubic meters per hour. The gap between those two numbers is staggering, and it's a difference you really need to understand to survive.
Standard bilge pumps cannot keep pace with open sea ingress. They are basically designed to handle routine rainwater and normal minor seepage.
When a major hull breach happens, the ocean is pouring in way faster than those standard pumps can spit it back out. Actually, it's like trying to put out a bonfire with a squirt gun. The crew desperately, urgently needs a high-capacity alternative right then and there, or that rig is going down.
The MacGyver moment, adapting cement pumps. This is where things get brilliant. Experienced towmasters recommend a total game-changer of an engineering pivot, adapting the heavy-duty cement slurry recirculation pumps. Normally, these are strictly used for drilling operations, but here, they become emergency salvage pumps. It is a highly effective way to use the incredibly powerful machinery you already have on board to save your life.
10x. Let's really hammer home why this works. By adapting these cement pumps, you instantly unlock 10 times the pumping capacity compared to your standard build system. I mean, these are massive, heavy-duty industrial pumps. They're already on the rig, they're already powered up, and they can evacuate an unbelievable volume of fluid when you are in a life or death situation.
Making this happen is a straightforward three-step process. First, the crew connects prefabricated adapters from the flooded space directly into the pump's suction line. Second, you fire the system up and literally route that heavy flood water straight through the massive cement pump. And third, you direct all that high-volume discharge overboard, specifically routing it through the rig's bulk surge tank vents.
Bulk surge tank overboard vents. Let's cut through the technical jargon for a second, because this is so clever. These vents are basically pre-existing 6 to 8 inch pipes that already stick out through the hull above the waterline. In plain English, they are pre-built, massive escape hatches. They are perfectly positioned to blast an enormous volume of floodwater right back into the ocean, and you don't have to make any structural modifications during a crisis to use them.
The golden rule, proactive preparation. Because the harsh, totally unforgiving truth of the ocean is this: none of this brilliant problem solving is going to work if you wait until the storm is literally on top of you to figure it out.
Pre-rig emergency tow lines at the stern, fabricate and store cement pump adapters, pre-plan suction/discharge routing, brief all crew on exact response procedures. Surviving a disaster offshore depends 100% on what you do proactively while you're safely tied up at the dock. You fabricate those adapters and store them right next to the pump. You physically plan out the routing, and you make sure every single crew member knows the exact game plan. You do the whole shebang when the sun is shining, not when the deck is violently pitching in the dark. If you wait until you need the emergency equipment to rig it, you have waited too long. Talk about hitting the nail on the head. That's a quote straight from a veteran towmaster, and it perfectly encapsulates the entire philosophy of offshore damage control. Preparation isn't just checking a box on some compliance form, you know? It is literally your ultimate and frankly your only reliable tool against disaster. Are your emergency systems truly ready, or are you just hoping the storm never comes? I want to leave you with that provocative thought. Look at the systems around you right now and ask yourself honestly, if things went wrong today, are you actually ready to deploy? Because hope is never, ever a valid strategy against the power of the ocean. Proactive preparation is everything. Keep learning, stay safe, and I really hope this explainer helps you prepare for whatever comes your way.